We're going to be moving beyond sonnets today. Not everything written in the Renaissance period was a sonnet, after all, and I want to try and sneak in a few other poems that I think are important. Today, we're actually going to read a poem by Queen Elizabeth I called On Monsieur's Departure. It's pretty awesome. I think it's particularly awesome because not only is it a great poem, but it's written by Queen Elizabeth, and so with the historical context. You get a window into her personality, into her ideas that you wouldn't normally get with an important historical figure. So we're going to jump over and look at her biography here in a second. But I guess, like the other thing that's exciting about this is you don't get a lot of poems written by female poets from the time period because, women were not encouraged to be particularly literate. You have to get up into, as we talked about back in the Anglo-Saxon period, a nun or in this case, a princess to sort of reach that. And so it was less common. There were also all kinds of obstacles in a patriarchal society to having a woman get published. Now, Queen Elizabeth did not publish this poem. This poem was written in her own personal diaries, and it was published by the royal family years later after her death. So it was kind of saved and eventually made its way to publication, and that's cool as well. I like sort of the backstory. So most of you know Queen Elizabeth from history class. She is probably the most famous and maybe the best monarch or leader that England ever had. She was born in 1533 and died in 1603. The fact that England had a Renaissance can really sort of be laid at her feet. I know that technically it starts with the Tudor dynasty in terms of the years, but when you're looking at Shakespeare, when you're looking at the enormous flowering of poetry and playwriting and the kinds of things that we have come to associate with Renaissance art from England, it all starts in the court of Elizabeth. It's often called the Elizabethan age, because it lasted so long. She was ruling England for 45 years or something like that. If you go to the Wikipedia page and you scroll down, you'll get a lot of background on her. She's really famous. What you need to know, I guess, to understand her a little bit is that her mom was Anne Boleyn, and her father had her mother executed before she was like 3 years old. So that's got to leave an impact on somebody. She was not heir to the throne. The heir to the throne was her brother, Edward VI. When he died, there was sort of a struggle for the throne between Elizabeth and her sister Mary. Mary initially won. Elizabeth overturned that and became queen. So the problem, though, with being a queen, and we see this in the poem, is that if Elizabeth gets married, the guy she marries becomes king. It's not until Queen Victoria that this sort of gets turned around, and the queen can marry somebody, and he'll be like the prince consort instead of the king. So everybody in Europe was interested in marrying Queen Elizabeth because if they married her, they became king of England. And she knew as soon as she married somebody that she would no longer have power. And so she is often referred to as the Virgin Queen, which of course is where the state we live in, Virginia, gets its name, which I think is pretty cool. Anyway, she never got married, but she did have people that she was interested in a romantic way. And actually, the poem we're going to read is a love poem that she wrote, most likely about a guy named the Duke of Anjou. I'm looking for, here he is. Nicholas, no, it was a painting by Nicholas Hilliard. So I'm trying to remember his name. I can't remember his name, but he was the Duke of Anjou, and she was very interested in him romantically, but had to give it up because she knew if she ever married him, it would, she'd lose her power. So she ruled her life. She never had any children, and she died, and King James was the next in line to the throne, but he wasn't directly related to her, and so the Tudor dynasty died with her. But she is, of course, enormously famous, not only for ruling and ruling well, but turning England into a naval superpower after defeating the Spanish Armada and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to read a poem that she wrote. called On Monsieur's Departure. Monsieur is like a Mr. in French, right? Like on Mr.'s departure, on his departure would be a way of thinking about it. But it tells you that it's a French guy she's writing about. And that leads most scholars to connect it to the Duke of Anjou because Anjou's in France. So we're going to read this really quickly, and then we'll go look at rhyme schemes and meters and, like all the stuff that we normally look at. Can I fit it all on one page? Yes, I can. So I grieve and dare not show my discontent. I love and yet am forced to seem to hate. I do, yet dare not say I ever meant. I seem stark mute, but inwardly do prate. I am and not. I freeze and yet am burned, since from myself another self I turned. My care is like my shadow in the sun, follows me flying, flies when I pursue it, stands and lies by me, does what I have done. His too familiar care does make me rue it. No means I find to rid him from my breast, till by the end of things it be suppressed. Some gentler passion slide into my mind, for I am soft and made of melting snow. Or be more cruel, love, and so be kind. Let me float or sink, be high or low. Or let me live with some more sweet content, or die, and so forget what love e'er meant. So the first thing you're going to notice is this is not a sonnet. It's not 14 lines. Clearly, more than that. You got 3 stanzas. Each stanza is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. 6 times 3 is 18 total lines. So it's not a sonnet. It's also in stanzas, as opposed to a sonnet, which is one big contiguous poem. So it's broken up into stanzas. The stanzas are sort of different thoughts. It is, however, an iambic pentameter. We know this by counting the syllables of the line. I grieve and dare not show my discontent. I love and yet am forced to seem to hate. I do yet dare not say I ever meant. I seem stark mute, but inwardly do prate. It has the rhythm, and it's 10 syllables every line. It's definitely iambic pentameter. We've got a rhyme scheme here. Your first one's going to be A, that's discontent. Hate is B, it doesn't rhyme with discontent. Meant goes with discontent, though, so that's A. Prate goes with hate, so that's B. And then burned is a C, and turned is a C. So it looks like your stanza is composed of a quatrain and a couplet. Is it the same thing here? Sun doesn't rhyme with anything else, so we're going to make that D. It doesn't rhyme with anything else, so that's E. Done rhymes with sun. It rhymes with it. And then breast and suppressed are F. So it's the same pattern, just with different rhymes in your second stanza, and it's probably going to be consistent throughout. Mind is going to be G. Snow is H. Kind goes with mind. Low goes with snow. And content and meant are new rhymes. So every one of these stanzas is a quatrain and a couplet, and they're in iambic pentameter. So, cool. Let's go through and analyze what she has to say specifically and what the poem means. She starts out, I grieve and dare not show my discontent. So she's sad. Grieve means sad. She's sad and she doesn't dare show it. Why? Because she's queen. If she shows her emotions in any way, because she's a woman and she's a monarch, she'll be seen as weak. She has even more responsibility to act sort of kingly in her role, because she's one of the few female monarchs in Europe in a time when the patriarchy reigned supreme. So she doesn't dare show any sign of weakness because people will pounce on it. I grieve, yet dare not show my discontent. I love, and yet am forced to seem to hate. So now we have a reason for it. She's in love with somebody, but she can't seem like she loves him because, again, weakness. And of course, if she marries anybody, she's no longer queen. So we already looked at that. Well, she's queen, but she's no longer the monarch. The king becomes the monarch. I do, yet dare not say I ever meant. So she does love him, but she doesn't say that she ever felt that way. Also, I think this I do is important because that's a marriage vow, right? So clearly she's thinking about it. She would maybe like to marry this guy, but she dares not say she ever meant. You can see that tied in there. I seem stark, mute, but inwardly do prate. So on the outside, we're getting this duality here. On the outside, she's mute, she's silent, she's sitting there with her lips sealed. But inwardly, she's prating. Now, to prate is to sort of babble and talk obsessively. So her thoughts are going a million miles per minute, even though you see her sitting there on her throne without thinking that anything's going on. I am and not. She's in love, but she's not because she can't be. I freeze and yet am burned. Now, here comes some symbols. It's the same symbols that Spenser used in an earlier poem. On the outside, she seems cold as ice. She freezes with a lack of emotion. But inside, she's burned, meaning, her love is a burning passion, but she keeps it inside this cold exterior. So you get this image of ice on the outside and fire on the inside, which I think is particularly poignant. And I love this last line. I freeze and yet am burned, since from myself another self I turned. So you get this image of there's two Elizabeths. There's the outward Elizabeth, the one she shows to the world, and there's an inward Elizabeth, the woman. So Elizabeth the monarch, Elizabeth the woman. Two identities housed in the same being, one on fire with passion, the other having to put out a cold, icy persona. And she's turned away the passionate one. She's had to turn away Elizabeth the woman to be Elizabeth the monarch. And it's expressed so powerfully in this line. We're going to jump on and look at the next one, but think about this window into an important historical figure. This is her own words. We know who Queen Elizabeth is, but how often do you get this? How often do you get to see the human side of a historical figure? This is awesome. Anyway, next stanza. My care is like my shadow in the sun, follows me flying, flies when I pursue it, stands and lies by me, does what I have done. So in this case, my care, my worry, my sorrow, my grief, we're going back up to this first line, is like, here's a simile, right? So I guess we've already had some symbols that I should probably, or metaphors, I guess we'll call them metaphors, sort of symbolic metaphors. And I'll put those in italics too. And this is obviously metaphorical. There are two selves, literally. My care is like my shadow in the sun. Follows me flying, flies when I pursue it, stands and lies by me, does what I have done. So she says this sorrow that she carries with her for being in love with somebody that she can't reciprocate the love of. It's an unrequited love poem, but it's not, right? Like, she loves him, but she can't show it. So it looks like the love is unrequited, but it's not really unrequited. There's some nuance here that I like. But she says the sorrow that she has for this is, in a simile, like her shadow. It's always there. She can't get rid of it. It follows her wherever she goes. If she tries to chase it away, you can't. Your shadow's always there. It stands next to her. It lies next to her when she goes to sleep at night. It does everything she does. She cannot lose her shadow. The sorrow, the grief of not being able to have a meaningful romantic relationship. Then she says, his too familiar care does make me rue it. So he's too familiar with her. On some level, it seems like he wants to have this relationship, and so he tries to treat her like a girlfriend, or like a love interest, and that makes her angry because she can't do that. She can't have that sort of relationship, and that makes her hate the way she feels. She wishes she could not feel this way, because when he does that, it probably hurts her worse than if he didn't do anything at all. She says, no means I find to rid him from my breast. Now, breast in this case means her heart. We're not talking about, So she says, I can't remove him from my heart. I can't remove him from my feelings. And that's obviously metaphorical too. He's not literally in her breast. That's her feelings for him inside. Till by the end of things, that's death, right? It be suppressed. So she's like, I'm going to love him forever. The only thing that's going to end this feeling is the death of me, until I'm dead. So that's the end of your second stanza. And then it brings us to the third stanza, where she starts begging or asking for change. She says, some gentler passion slide into my mind, for I am soft and made of melting snow. Again, we got a metaphor here. And that's going to be an important metaphor. Or be more cruel, love, and so be kind. This is a paradox. So I'm going to italicize that. Let me float or sink, be high or low. And again, that's literally, she's not going to float or sink. We're talking about her emotional quality. So again, we've got more figurative language there. Or let me live with some more sweet content, or die and so forget what love ever meant. So let's unpack this. Some gentler passion slide into my mind, for I am soft and made of melting snow. If she wants to not love him as fiercely as she does, she characterized it as a fire. And we're dealing with in her mind versus physically what she's putting out there. So she wants to feel less strongly. She wants that fire to die down. You can see that she says, I am soft and made of melting snow. There's two things I think we can take out of this. One goes back to our freeze metaphor before. She's afraid that cold exterior is going to melt, that she's not going to be able to hold it up, right? And she's worried that the feelings inside are going to show through and she won't be able to contain them. And that comes across in this melting snow metaphor. But melting snow also results in drips, and the water dripping and melting is a classic symbol for sorrow. There's grief and sorrow in this. Maybe she's crying on some level. The melting snow is tears coming out of her eyes. Then she says, and here's your paradox, or be more cruel, love, and so be kind. She says, if you could only be a jerk, if you could only be a bad person, it'd be really easy to get over you. And so on some level, if you were nice, if you were mean, it would be actually better for me. It would be kinder to me if you were mean and acted in a negative way, because then I could get over you, right? So this idea that somehow if he was more cruel, it would be kinder to her is a paradox. And of course, this has sort of become something that you see in pop culture now, like this idea that sometimes it's better to sort of rip the Band-Aid off, metaphorically speaking, to be cruel. If you're in a relationship and it's over, it's sometimes better just to cut ties so you don't have that lingering sorrow and sadness going on. And that's sort of, I think, what Queen Elizabeth's getting at here. Anyway, she continues, let me float or sink, be high or low. Now, metaphorically, she's talking about her emotions. She's like, I just want consistency. I'm tired of this up and down roller coaster that we're living. And I'm tired of being high and low and high and low. Just let me flatline somewhere. It's gotta stop. Right. So let me have some consistency, emotional consistency. Or let me live with some more sweet content. She just wants things. She doesn't want the crazy highs. She doesn't want the manic lows. She wants steady, peaceful content. Or die and so forget what love ever meant. So at the end of this, she's like, either let it mellow out so I'm not feeling like I'm feeling now, or let me die. It really shows you, I think, the internal struggle that she has going on. And that makes this a powerful piece of literature. I'm going to pause it and throw in some sound devices just so you can see that she's an accomplished poet. She really knows what she's doing. And then we'll read it one more time and call it done. So she's got a lot of good sound devices in here. You can look at the first line. Dare and discontent are alliteration. Not and discontent are consonants. And forced consonants. Yet, hate consonants. Do, dare. Yet, not, meant, dare, and ever. Seem and stark. Mute and but, both, and prate. Oh, I missed one. Look at that. Am, and, that's assonance. Not, yet. Both of those end with a T sound. The am and also goes with and am again. So there's sort of an inversion. It's am, and am. So there's that. And then the burned ties in with all the D's on the ands. So there's that going on. Myself, that's an I sound, an I here. Again, an I sound here. My, like, I. My is the same sound. Then we get shadow and sun, both the same S sound. Follows, flying, flies. And then the I sound in eyes goes with flying, also with I. So I can go through and look at it all, but you can look at the underlines and you can sort of see that she's done a really good job of tying sound devices together to give this thing sort of flow, not only with the rhyme scheme, not only with the iambic pentameter, but also with the sound devices. And then, the whole thing has this consistent message, which is really powerful. Anyway, I'm gonna go back. Let's take one last look at the title on Monsieur's departure. He's leaving, right? So this is her thoughts as he leaves. She hasn't told him all that she feels because she can't. And she's watching him leave, and she's probably wondering whether he'll ever come back. This is the Queen of England. I'm going to read it to you one more time, and then we'll call this video done. I grieve and dare not show my discontent. I love and yet am forced to seem to hate. I do yet dare not say I ever meant. I seem stark mute, but inwardly do prate. I am and not. I freeze and yet am burned, since from myself another self I turned. My care is like my shadow in the sun, follows me flying, flies when I pursue it, stands and lies by me, does what I have done. His too familiar care does make me rue it. No means I find to rid him from my breast, till by the end of things it be suppressed. Some gentler passion slide into my mind, for I am soft and made of melting snow. Or be more cruel, love, and so be kind. Let me float or sink, be high or low. Or let me live with some more sweet content. Or die, and so forget what love ever meant. Queen Elizabeth, folks. She's awesome.